So,
Yeah,
hello.
you can.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
evening, ma'am.
Yes.
So
Good
today
evening.
we would be having the management on breast cancer, which is covering all the aspects which are essential for general surgeons, by our very own Dr. Prachi Mahajan, ma'am. Ma'am, we hand over the mic to you, ma'am.
Good evening, madam.
Thank you.
Dr. Atish here.
Good evening. Yes, welcome, Atish. First
Madam,
of all, I must thank.
Madam,
Yes,
I have
yes,
to make a small announcement.
okay. Yes,
As
please.
I would like to first thank you, and as well as a small instructions for everyone.
Yeah.
As we have a lot number of questions, so we
Yeah.
would be restricting one question per person, and I would request everyone who is attending this webinar they can send their extra questions on the ASN or BSA group personally. So
Absolutely.
only one question per person, so that we should be able to stick to time. Yesterday we received a call from many senior surgeons because of many people were asking 3 to 4 questions. It was not possible for them to ask questions,
Okay.
and they ultimately logged off.
Fine. So we'll take care of that. And
Yeah, madam.
yeah, okay. So thank you,
Okay.
Yogesh and Atish, for organization of this wonderful webinar series. And I must congratulate all of you and welcome listeners. Welcome Abhinav, who's going to chair with Atish. And the topic being very broad, I just want to make it concise so that it is useful for practicing surgeons and students alike, so that everybody gets the best of it. Most of the things are known to all of us, so it's going to be very short. So I'm going to just divide my talk into the following points. So all of us are surgeons, we all know. So the first section is going to be about what we all know. So that includes the diagnosis, clinical features, staging, and surgery. That is going to be in brief because we know what it is. Then a little bit about what is new in the management of breast cancer. Then what is important, but we do not always remember because these are theoretical things. And when we read books of, it's been a long time since we've actually read our textbooks. So, these are things which we should know, but we may not always remember. And there are things which we should know, which includes some adjuvant therapy, hormone receptors, tumor biology, prognostic indicators, and so on. So since we are all surgeons, what is the role of a surgeon in the management of breast cancer? It starts with seeing the patient for the first time in our OPD, to coming to a diagnosis, to discussing treatment options with the patients, offering whichever surgical treatment is going to benefit that particular patient. So optimization of surgical treatment. We have to keep a follow-up of our patients, which is very, very important. Then our role sometimes comes in cases of surgical hormone ablation, then we might have to do an oophorectomy. Then our role, or maybe the plastic surgeon's role, also comes in wherever a reconstruction is concerned, and as well as a prophylactic mastectomy. So all these are the roles where a surgeon is involved with the patient. And we all know that management of breast cancer is a multi-modality treatment and it is a team effort. So coming to the first section, what we all already know and what is new in what we know. So we all know that whenever we see a patient with a suspicious breast lump, we can actually diagnose by clinical examination what is a suspicious lesion. And so when we examine a patient, we of course consider the size of the tumor, the lymph node status, and we look for metastasis. So there is a clinical staging. We all know the TNM staging, so I am not going to go into the details of this. So T1, T2, T3, and T4 lesions, and the corresponding lymph node examination, axillary lymph node examination. For metastasis, of course, we need to conduct investigations to arrive at a diagnosis whether a breast cancer is metastatic or not. So we have all spoken about the triple assessment which comes into play in diagnosis and screening of patients. So following a clinical examination, we do imaging, which is in the form of a mammography and FNAC. So a clinical examination, mammography, and FNAC makes what is known as a triple screening of a patient. The commonest investigation which we do, the commonest imaging which we do, is a mammography. And a mammography also includes an ultrasonography. So a mammography, that is a digital mammography in today's age, and an ultrasound. In some patients, I'm going to come to indications of each. In some patients, an MRI may be needed in order to detect whether a patient has a metastatic breast cancer, a CT or a PET scan or a bone scan might be needed. So mammography is basically a simple investigation where we get to know the architecture of the breast as seen from the radiological point of view. And with the advent of a digital mammography, of course, because the resolution is good, a patient of any age group can be subjected to mammography, unlike the previous days. So this is a typical appearance of an invasive breast cancer.
उधर आके बैठो.
You can see the architectural distortion, the irregular, speculated appearance of a lesion, which is a typical appearance of a breast cancer. There could be calcifications like these, which may be in old patients because of ductal calcifications also, but in such cases, one has to look for DCIS, that is ductal carcinoma in situ. So this is one particular example. So when we do ultrasound, even ultrasound has revolutionized or evolved over the years. So nowadays we have very high resolution ultrasound imaging also, such as a 4D or an elastography, and these investigations could also guide us to having a diagnosis of CA breast. There are certain handheld thermal scans which can be used as screening procedures in the OPD as well. So this is an ultrasound image on the left and a thermal image on the right hand side. In patients where mammography is not very clear, or we get an unequivocal finding on MRI and ultrasound, in such patients an MRI is indicated. Also those lesions which are not picked up on mammography, such as you can see the arrow pointing there, and even such lesions can be picked up on an MRI. In addition to that, diagnosis of multicentricity or presence of suspicious lesion in the contralateral breast, that can also be picked up in an MRI. As we can see, the ductal architecture is very well seen, and certain subtraction of the image can be done in order to localize and characterize the lesions better. So in the image, you can see that this particular lesion, which was hidden, can also be seen. Now, if a patient wants a breast conservation in a case like this, because this was what was seen on the mammography, here we can see, but this particular extensive component, again, somewhat suspicious, could not be seen on a mammogram. So for better characterization of the lesion, an MRI is a better tool. Some patients may present with lymphadenopathy, but a lesion may not be seen on ultrasound or a mammography. Here you can see some internal mammary lymph nodes also, which are very clearly seen on an MRI. So better resolution is an advantage of a dynamic contrast enhanced MRI as compared to the routine modalities. But an MRI is not a routine screening procedure. It has to be reserved for certain particular indications. Then coming to pathologic tools for investigations, we've already spoken about FNAC, which is a very good procedure as the results are available early. It can be conducted as an OPD procedure, and it does not need any anesthesia, and it is associated with a high sensitivity and specificity. But the gold standard in diagnosis remains to be a core biopsy. In case of a larger lesion, it can be taken with a core needle, a core biopsy needle like this, either blindly, but more specifically under ultrasound guidance. The next could be in cases where we again do not get a specific or a definite result, or there are other lesions which also need to be considered, and a lesion which has not yielded us a proper result on FNAC or a core biopsy, an excision biopsy is indicated. So the remaining list we are going to consider later on also, so I'm not going to dwell upon all these factors right now. But a core biopsy, again, the fallacy sometimes could be that the biopsy, same with FNAC, the biopsy has not been taken from the actual lesion. It has somewhat missed the core or the center of the lesion, or the most suspicious area. And in these cases, an excision biopsy needs to be done. Again, some lesions are too small. So a blind excision biopsy, or just, you take a patient, you sometimes don't even know. So these are mammographically impalpable lesions or MRI detected lesions. And we might need to do a guided biopsy in such cases. As you can see, the patient goes for an ultrasound, and the guide wire is placed into the lesion. Immediately we take the patient into the OT, do a dissection around the lesion until the entire specimen is removed, and this is a specimen mammography to look for completeness of excision. Now, once the diagnosis has been established, we all know what we're going to do. So it is going to be in an operable lesion, of course. We're going to investigate, as I said, for presence of metastasis. And if a patient is operable, that is mainly stage 1 or 2, we are going to advise the patient surgery. And we all know that William Halsted was the pioneer of this surgery. But what he actually proposed was a radical mastectomy, and later on there were several modifications, such as a Patty's mastectomy, where the pectoralis major and minor. The initial radical mastectomies were where the pectoralis major and minor muscles both were excised and removed, and it used to cause considerable discomfort as well as cosmetic disability to the patient. So over the years, as in case of minimal access surgery, even in the treatment of breast cancer, less is more. And considering the statistics of the results, or the 5-year and 10-year and 20-year survival rates, we have reached the conclusion that oncological benefit is the same, where the patient selection, of course, is very appropriate. And what we all do now is a modified radical mastectomy, the specimen of which looks like this. I don't need to go into the details because this is a procedure which all of us do. And usually we take an elliptical, transversely placed incision. We remove the nipple and areola along, and a patch of skin surrounding it along with the specimen. Our incision has to be placed, including a good margin, a good skin margin also around the lesion, depending upon the location of the lesion. And that is how we go about taking the incision, and it is extended into the axilla. Then we dissect cutaneous flaps at the subcutaneous level, and the flaps have to be thin and moderately thick at the same time, in order not to compromise the blood supply of the skin, and in order to prevent ischemic necrosis later on. So this is a standard specimen of a modified radical mastectomy, which of course we need to orient. Then so this is the extent of surgery in a modified radical mastectomy. Now coming to the newer, especially in those cases, I mean, I am going to come to indications and contraindications of breast conservation surgery as well, but mainly for smaller tumors, wherever breast conservation surgery is possible, it consists of a lumpectomy or a wide local excision, and traditionally it did include axillary clearance, but I'll come to it as we have come to as the surgery has evolved, and whether or not a complete axillary clearance needs to be done depends upon a few factors. The results of a breast conservation surgery are very good, as you can see. In both the patients, the asymmetry is not much. The scars are concealed, and it gives a very good cosmetic effect. At the same sitting, an oncoplastic surgery can be done, which involves rotation flaps mainly, or advancement of the surrounding tissue, and one can get a very good cosmetic result, maintaining a good cosmetically acceptable volume in the operated breast. So as I said, while speaking about breast conservation surgery, we have to talk about management of the axilla. And of course, whatever kind of imaging modality we have undertaken, we know the status of the axilla pre-operatively, and which are the lymph nodes which are likely to be malignant. So nowadays, what we want to talk about, what we're coming to basically is sentinel lymph node biopsy. But before that, just let me go back to what is breast conservation treatment. Of course, it is a very good treatment which gives excellent confidence and psychological benefit as well as a cosmetic benefit without causing any oncologic compromise in the patients. So all T1, T2 tumors are amenable to breast conservation surgery. NET post neoadjuvant treatment can be subjected to a BCT if the patient so wishes. There are a certain relative indications such as a small tumor in a large breast. So we have to see the relative ratio. Then peripherally placed tumors are more amenable to BCT. And of course, we have to take the patient's wish into consideration. It is ultimately the patient's wish whether they wish to go for a modified radical mastectomy or a breast conservation, because radiation and chemotherapy are both required. So what are contraindications to breast conservation surgery? So 2 or more primary tumors in separate quadrants of the breast. So multicentricity is definitely out. We do not do a BCT in pregnancy because a radiation is a must. History of prior irradiation to the breast also is not recommended. Then if a patient has undergone a lumpectomy and there are persistent positive margins, then it is better to go for a mastectomy. Inflammatory breast cancer and diffuse or indeterminate microcalcifications on mammography. So all these are contraindications to BCT. So even going more further as surgical management evolves, sentinel lymph node biopsy has been around for a few years, at least about 15 years. And this is how it is done. A blue dye, isosulfan blue, is injected into the lesion, into the primary tumor in the breast, about 10 minutes before we begin the surgery. And later on, as we sample the axilla, and we can see a node. If it has the first node which gets stained is the sentinel lymph node. And nowadays, with the advances in technology, it is not just this clinical assessment of the node turning blue, but we can use newer techniques such as radioactive labeled dye injection, and more recently an indocyanine green injection. I think Abhinav will be able to highlight us on this better because he's been doing it now. So these are the things, and if a lymph node turns out to be positive on frozen section or intraoperative cytology, and in that case we have to go for a complete axillary clearance. In other cases, an axillary dissection is not needed, and a simple wide local excision will do. Which thus negates, the side effects coming from axillary lymph node dissection, such as a lymphedema mainly. So these are the different surgical procedures. Just to recap: a modified radical mastectomy, a breast conservation surgery, and a sentinel lymph node biopsy. Breast reconstruction, that is the plastic surgeon's domain, but as I said, it could be an oncoplastic surgery if we are doing a BCT, where the focus is on maintaining good amount of breast volume that gives an obvious cosmetic benefit to the patient. Post mastectomy reconstruction is done in various ways, either with local regional flaps, mainly the tram flap or the latissimus dorsi flap. And implants are used occasionally, but they are now quite obsolete because of a lot of disadvantages which they have shown. So as I said, this is breast reconstruction. So this has been an overview of what we already know as a surgeon. The rest of the presentation also consists of everything we know. We have read it when we appeared for exams, mainly because it comes to the part which we tend to just overlook or just run our eyes over it. But they are important from treatment point of view. At least we should be able to tell the patient which kind of carcinoma is associated with a better prognosis, and what kind of treatment is going to be needed in future. So pathological classification, we have seen that it could be a non-invasive or in situ carcinoma, which is intraductal or a lobular carcinoma in situ, or an invasive type of carcinoma. This is the commonest, which is an infiltrating duct carcinoma. It could be an infiltrating lobular carcinoma, medullary, colloid, papillary, tubular, adenoid cystic, secretory, inflammatory, and carcinoma with metaplasia. And Paget's disease of the nipple is another invasive carcinoma, but it is considered as a separate entity. As far as surgical management is concerned, we are not directly involved with the intricacies of the pathological appearance, but we definitely have to know what we are dealing with. So this is roughly the proportion as well as the 5-year survival rates. And of course, when these tumors are detected in the early stages, we all know about the importance of early detection in a breast carcinoma. So coming to a little bit about ductal carcinoma in situ, this is a separate entity by itself, and it is characterized by the proliferation of malignant epithelial cells, but they are confined to the mammary ducts. According to the arrangement of cells on histopathology, they may be present in comedo, solid, cribriform, papillary, and micropapillary types. So these are usually detected on imaging unless some solid or comedo types could be palpable, mostly as a not a well-defined lesion. So the treatment of DCIS depends upon various factors. There could be microinvasion. It is a microinvasion which could be less than 1 millimeter in size. Occult invasive cancer may develop. Microinvasion may occur in various locations inside the duct. So it is basically in situ, but there may be microinvasion. DCIS could be multicentric, or it could be a manifestation in the contralateral breast. So our treatment is going to depend upon all these factors. And there is a Van Nuys prognostic index, which basically includes age of the patient, size of the tumor, margin width, and pathological characteristics. And accordingly, the decision to perform or to decide the extent of surgical resection depends upon this. So it may be a BCT or a simple mastectomy. Axillary dissection is usually not necessary. A simple mastectomy is sufficient in many cases unless the prognostic index is quite high. Of course, when we operate on a patient or we do not operate on a patient with DCIS, a regular and meticulous follow-up is necessary. Watchful observation is also one of the treatment, of course, one of the approaches to DCIS, and in any case, a regular and meticulous follow-up is extremely, extremely important. Coming to the next entity, which is a lobular carcinoma in situ. This is again proliferation of malignant epithelial cells, but it is confined within lobules. And these are usually difficult to diagnose and may present as vague or diffuse lumps. In many cases, they are not picked up on mammograms. A core biopsy is usually diagnostic if a diffuse lump is palpable. Again, there are various options such as observation. Tamoxifen is known to provide good results with a lobular carcinoma in situ. Of course, with more extent of invasion, a mastectomy, and sometimes depending upon if a patient has a very high risk or a very significant family history of invasive breast cancer, one might need to even resort to a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. So this totally depends upon assessment of risk factor in a particular patient. So that was a little bit about the in situ carcinomas, and now we come to, again, these are things which we should know so that we are able to see the prognosis or study the prognosis of particular patients. So a certain atypical pathologic types are again medullary. Medullary carcinoma shows bizarre anaplastic cells, and these are surrounded by a lymphocyte. Type is a mucinous or colloid, which is well differentiated, and one can see pools of colloid on histopathology. and a tubular malignancy, which is associated with very good prognosis. And I don't know what this is, but I'll just shut this off. I'm getting a notification. Anyway, uh, Paget's disease of the nipple presents as an eczematoid patch. It starts from the nipple and then spills out over the areola. And it can have various presentations from being just a superficial excoriation to a deeper ulcer. And it's always invasive, and it is treated by modified radical mastectomy. So one needs to catch a Paget's disease early before it causes extensive invasion. Another atypical presentation, inflammatory breast cancer, is a form of a locally advanced breast cancer, but this, because of its extreme virulence and very significant findings and poor prognosis, it needs to be considered as a separate entity. It is characterized by extreme erythema, edema, pain, and it progresses very, very rapidly. So we have to have our alarm bells ringing. If we see a picture like this, it needs to be differentiated from a benign inflammatory process going on in the breast. And that can be done by a core biopsy. So a little bit again about locally advanced breast cancer, since we have spoken about operable breast cancers before, but just as one of the presentations is an inflammatory breast cancer. If a patient does not go to a doctor early on and the tumor goes on enlarging, then it could be T2 or N123. It could be a T4 lesion with any lymph node status. Most of these LABCs are inoperable at diagnosis. 25 to 30%, of course, are inoperable at diagnosis because we are unable to get a clear margin if we go to operate on such a patient. 75% of LABCs have very large multiple lymph nodes. So these patients have to be subjected to a neoadjuvant chemo or radiation therapy. They have to be downstaged before subjecting them to a mastectomy. So this was about a few atypical presentations and a few pathological variants and their behavior and what needs to be, what we need to know about it. This is the third section. I don't know whether I'm going too fast, but I think this is the the third section, and this has to do with tumor biology, so to say, and adjuvant therapy, which most of us surgeons usually do not study much about, or it is too elaborate, and with so many trials going on. So many trials, so many studies, it is not possible for us to remember everything. But previously, what used to be seen, whether a patient needs to have adjuvant therapy or not, is age of the patient, stage of the disease, whether a patient is pre or postmenopausal, whether a patient has a significant family history, and whether the patient, the specimen comes out to be node positive or node negative. So on the basis of these criteria, previously adjuvant therapy used to be decided. But nowadays that doesn't hold true because we have many useful tools. The most important of which are the hormone receptor status, that is the ER/PR HER2 new receptor status, and an array of genetic studies, that these are known as genetic or DNA microarrays, and a study of the prognostic indicators, which we all must know. So what are hormone receptors? We know that breast cancer is a heterogeneous disease. It has diverse histological and molecular variants. We have seen the diverse histological variants in the previous section, but there are also various molecular variations. And that is why a receptor status of a particular patient is the most valuable tool. This helps in determining prognosis as well as the responsiveness to therapy. So we know that when we do a histopathological examination, we also send a specimen to a hormone receptor study. And what is a hormone receptor study? The receptors which are basically studied, and depending upon the positivity or negativity of these receptors, we may have estrogen receptor or a progesterone receptor positive tumor. It may be a human epidermal growth factor receptor positivity with or without ER/PR positivity, or a patient may have triple negative status, that is, all receptors are negative. Various techniques are used to assess these receptor studies and to study the tumor biology. These include immunohistochemistry, DNA microarray studies, and a FISH, which is a fluorescent in situ hybridization techniques. So depending upon the presence or absence of the receptors, and depending upon which receptors are overexpressed, and whether what is the site of origin of the tumor, whether it is a luminal cell or a myoepithelial cell or a basal cell, there are various subtypes. This is the basic molecular biology of any breast cancer. So depending upon these biological tests, it may be a luminal A type subtype, which is an ER positive with or without PR positivity, but HER2 negativity. Luminal B has all receptors positive. We may have HER2 overexpressing, that is, in the absence of ER/PR, that is ER/PR negative status, it may be HER2 positive, which is a HER2 overexpressing type, and these usually do well with Herceptin treatment, that is trastuzumab. Basal-like, which are triple negative is one, basal-like, and of course there are studies of other proteins such as keratins and claudins and what have you. And the fifth subtype is a normal breast-like. So this is based on tumor biology. We need to know a little bit of these because the treatment of the adjuvant treatment is going to depend upon these. We know that there is a strong evidence that estrogen plays a role in the development and progression of breast cancer. And estrogen antagonists are various drugs. The commonest amongst these is tamoxifen, which has withstood the test of time. Tamoxifen is a very good estrogen receptor antagonist. The other ones are fulvestrant, and more recently there are aromatase inhibitors such as anastrozole, letrozole, exemestane. All these reduce the estrogen synthesis and they block the estrogen receptors, thereby preventing proliferation of malignant tumor cells. Coming to progesterone receptors. A PR positive tumor normally indicates that the estrogen pathway is intact and it is functional, and that means that the tumor is ER/PR dependent. Thus, ER and PR positive tumors are more likely to benefit from hormone therapy, but that is not all. There are other treatment protocols also which need to be considered after looking into the molecule, the total molecular biology. Negative tumors better respond to chemotherapy, and hormone therapy has been proved to improve the quality of life and survival. So when we talk about survival, we talk about overall survival and a disease-free survival. So since the addition of hormone therapy, there has been a definite improvement in 5-year and 10-year survival rates, and the recurrence rates have definitely gone down. Coming to HER2. So what is HER2? It is a human epidermal growth factor receptor, which is routinely analyzed in our studies. It belongs to a transmembrane tyrosine kinase family that signals activation, transcription, and thereby multiplication of malignant cells. So there are antibodies which are known to act against HER2 receptors, or they combine with these HER2 receptors and thereby prevent ligand binding so that nuclear proliferation does not take place. So trastuzumab, we all know it by the name of Herceptin. Of course, resistance is also known to these. So the medical oncologists have to decide whether a routine chemotherapy is also needed in addition to Herceptin. Then there are certain tyrosine kinase inhibitors also which are used to block HER2. So that was about our hormones, hormone therapy in breast cancer. Chemotherapy, just as other treatment, just as surgical treatment and other treatment, has evolved from what it used to be probably when we were students and residents. The blanket protocol used to be CMF, that is cyclophosphamide, methotrexate, and 5-FU, associated with a lot of side effects. Then the anthracyclines came in, essentially epirubicin, daunorubicin, and a thorough cardiac evaluation, of course, needs to be done. There is another class of drugs which are taxanes. The commonest is paclitaxel and docetaxel. The taxanes are known to have a good effect in the treatment of metastatic breast cancer and early stage breast cancer. So it again improves the overall survival and disease-free survival rates. Radiation therapy, external beam or internal radiation brachytherapy. Initially, there used to be a protracted, long, daily radiation therapy which used to be given, but nowadays it is commonly given in hypofractionated doses. And the other newer variant is a proton therapy. All these are targeted radiation therapies. So, of course, a breast conservation surgery that we've seen always needs radiation therapy as an adjuvant. Other indications for radiation therapy in a post-mastectomy patient is where there are 4 or more positive axillary lymph nodes. The primary tumor size is more than 5 centimeters. That is a T4 disease. And post mastectomy, the margins are very close or the margins are positive. And a post-mastectomy radiation therapy is known to reduce the risk of locoregional failure. So it is very important in prevention of recurrences in such cases. So coming to a little bit about prognostic indicators, because we keep hearing about these DNA tests and DNA microarrays, and with so many tools available, it is always good to make a good use of these tools, such as the commonest that we hear about is the Oncotype DX or the MammaPrint. So these are basically these are basically studies of the genetic profile of an individual, and depending upon how many genes are studied, like Oncotype DX usually estimates about 21 gene sequence, whereas a MammaPrint sequences some 70 odd, I think. Ki-67 analysis is another antigen study. Then various companies and various countries have their own genetic microarrays, whichever is preferred. But Oncotype DX, we all know, because this predicts the recurrence rates of a patient and whether a chemotherapy is going to be of added benefit depends upon, because this gives us a probability of a patient having a recurrence in the future. There is another prognostic index, which is a Nottingham prognostic index. This depends upon the size of the tumor, number of lymph nodes, and the grade of the tumor. Depending upon that, determines the predictability for recurrence. So I think I've covered most of the aspects of surgical and non-surgical management. And to conclude, let me say that management of breast cancer is a multi-pronged, multi-modality team approach. The aim of treatment is curative in operable breast cancer. LABC or metastatic stage 4 breast cancers are difficult to treat. The outcome depends upon tumor biology, and neoadjuvant treatment is required. The result is judged by the OS and DFS rates, but in every patient, we must focus on the quality of life. In case the presentation has been boring and people have gone to sleep, Angelina Jolie is going to brighten you up. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we would like to just kind of go through some of the questions. In order to kind of sum it up, what Prachi ma'am told about the management on breast cancer, which forms the essential modalities for the general surgeons. So she very rightly has pointed out regarding the 4 important points. First, as to what we know about breast cancer. Second is what's new in breast cancer. Third is what we may not remember. Definitely, ma'am, most of us kind of fall into this category, that what we may not remember, and what we should know, very rightly pointed out. And initially, as you kind of stressed upon the importance of staging, then the diagnosis, which has to be kind of subjected to triple assessment, which is more than 99.99%, it is able to give us the diagnosis, which includes clinical examinations, imaging, as well as the pathology. And what you very rightly pointed out regarding the first step, that is the clinical management, which also includes the three different types of modalities, like the surgical procedures, which was very beautifully pointed upon, the indications of a modified radical mastectomy. Nowadays, the concept which is coming into vogue, that is the breast conservation surgery, along with the sentinel lymph node biopsy and the oncoplastic breast reconstructions. Then you kind of pointed upon the intricacies which are associated with the pathological classification and their important treatment modalities which need to be subjected, like for DCIS, LCIS, and then the different atypical pathological types, as well as the different presentations. You also kind of very rightly highlighted upon the radiological aspects, like the mammogram, the indications of a MRI in cases of breast cancer procedures. Then the newer modalities, like the adjuvant treatment, which initially formed the important aspect, like that of the receptor status, and that line which is so important, like breast cancer being such a heterogeneous disease, we need to know about the ER/PR, HER2/neu, as well as the different molecular biology and subtypes, like the luminal type A, type B, which is clinically absolutely relevant in considerations of adjuvant therapies, as well as the chemotherapy protocols which you pointed out. The radiation therapy, it is also kind of on forefront for especially for the modalities like breast conservation surgeries, as well as for mastectomies. And the thing which is in vogue and which is very rightly being highlighted, like that of Oncotype DX. Patients have tremendously benefited with the use of this Oncotype DX, typically a elderly female, ER/PR positive, HER2 negative, node negative, with a very low Oncotype DX score. Imagining a patient kind of escaping through the trauma of chemotherapy, that itself is so heartening for surgeons as well as clinicians like us. And very rightly pointed out that breast cancer treatment being a multi-pronged, multi-modality team approach, and very rightly that ideal balance between the unnecessary mutilations and the dangerously conservative approaches has to be really sought after, keeping into the mind the four important aspects, like one is oncology, second being cosmesis, third being quality of life, and fourth being organ preservation. And treatment has to be definitely changed from maximum tolerable now to the minimum effective, which is kind of being practiced in most of the parts of the world. And what you rightly said, that more is not always better and less is not always inferior. So ma'am, we are extremely thankful to you for such nice presentation, and
Thank you.
we would like to have certain questions. Yes, ma'am.
Abhinav, you have summarized it very well. I just want you to highlight a little bit about sentinel lymph node, especially ICG, since you've been doing it.
Okay, ma'am. So basically, this concept of breast conservation has come up because most of the trials which have taken place in Europe and United States, they have very rightly pointed out that the overall survival basically remains the same for a breast conservation surgery as well as a modified radical mastectomy. So in order to avoid such a mutilating procedure for a very rightly indicated patient, there has been a concept of sentinel lymph node biopsy, in which we sample, as you rightly kind of very nicely showed the diagram of injection of the indocyanine green or the isosulfan blue and radiocolloid into the breast parenchyma, and we trace it into the axilla and give a very small incision. So ma'am, currently what is happening is that there are a lot of dyes which are being highlighted upon, as well as they are being studied. There have been trials which have been going upon in comparison of the conventional methylene blue and radiocolloid, versus the indocyanine green. And in fact, the indocyanine green has now been started using also in cases of laparoscopy. So in terms of open surgeries, breast conservation surgeries, this forms one of the best modalities, in which now what we kind of do is the retroareolar injection of the indocyanine green dye is put just as you rightly pointed out before, around 10 to 15 minutes of surgery. Then breast is being massaged for 5 to 10 minutes, and painting draping then happens. Now as we take out the laser light, which is a handheld probe, like for we use for identification of radiocolloid, sulfur radiocolloid dye. Similarly, there is a handheld probe which focuses the laser lights at somewhere around 800 nanometers, and it picks up the fluorescence. So as we put in the indocyanine green, we are able to trace the lymphatics exactly and find out the sentinel lymph nodes, and we give a very small incision in the axilla. We are able to highlight those sentinel lymph nodes of importance which take up the dye, and send it for frozen section on table. And in case if the nodes are negative, that is out of 3 or 4 nodes, if all the 4 are negative, then the patient gets away without a complete lymphadenectomy, significantly decreasing the post-operative morbidity, like a total a lymphedema which can happen over a period of time, as well as the tingling numbness which can happen. So because of the damage of the intercostal vessels, the intercostal brachial plexus. So these are some of the newer modalities which are coming up, and ICG is now being really picked up well, because that being not a very radio sensitive dye, it can be procured and can be kept at room temperatures. So this is one of the recent modalities, ma'am, which has being introduced into our practice, and it is really working wonders. It is giving very good results in terms of breast conservation, ma'am. So
That's good.
yeah, yes, ma'am. So any questions would be welcome for Prachi, ma'am.
Madam, one question from me.
Yes, Atish.
Prachi madam, very nice lecture. We are really mesmerized by your knowledge and delivering it. My one question is ki how to stage and treat bilateral synchronous breast cancers.
The staging, of course, when we come to bilateral, of course, we know that the patient, of course, we have to characterize every breast depending upon the size and the nodal status. But once proved, a patient, and depends upon the multicentricity and the age of the patient, so many factors need to be taken into consideration. When we are doing a core biopsy, we need to do it on both sides, of course, and subject the tumor to the receptor status, and accordingly we have to decide whether a bilateral breast conservation would do, or a BCT and on one side, mastectomy on the other, or a bilateral mastectomy. So whatever we're going to do, we have to explain to the patient that it is in the best oncologic interest of the patient. First of all, we don't have to compromise on any oncologic benefit and oncologic outcome. So I mean, once proof, one has to treat the patient that way.
Madam, basically means if one side is stage 2 and another side is stage 3, then should we give the patient neoadjuvant chemo, or should we do a bilateral mastectomy, or means how should we plan?
See, basically, in any case of cancer, we have to take the patient into consideration, and there are various options. It is not like this has to be done, one thing and nothing else. But of course, with a stage 3 on one side, I think we do need to downstage by giving neoadjuvant therapy first, downstage that side, and then operate on both, if it's not going to take too much time also.
Okay, madam. Okay, thank you. Yogesh, please ask the questions to get questions from audience.
Yes.
So Prachi ma'am, if you remember this week only, when we just a week before, I had told you that we always used to like your talks and lectures.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
So thank you very much for that enlightenment.
It's a pleasure.
So
because, I mean,
the role I'll ask. Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah. No, I also got to read and this. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. So, ma'am, we will be taking questions one by one. It will be an alphabetical way which will go down. I'll again remind all the attendees here. I'll take their name. They have to unmute their own mic and then ask the question. Only one question per attendee will be allowed from today. We are not going to allow more than one question. Extra questions will be put up in WhatsApp group. Then madam will reply there. So the first
Sure.
question is from Dr. Ashok Gajbia, sir. Sir,
Okay.
please unmute your mic. Ashok, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
Ashok, sir, unmute your mic and ask the question. I guess he is not there. He is not unmuting.
Okay.
We'll go
Okay,
to the
okay.
yeah.
The
Ashok,
next-
sir, you are online.
Hello?
Yeah. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes. Yes, Dr. Gandhi.
Nice presentation, Prachi madam. I want
Thank
to
you.
ask one
Thank you.
question.
Yes.
How long we should give tamoxifen in a case of carcinoma of breast patient, estrogen
Yeah.
positive?
Right. See, basically, that the ultimate decision is from the medical oncologist, but minimum 3 years has to be given, sometimes up to 5 years. If a patient is young and premenopausal, then we need to go for surgical option, that is surgical hormone ablation, that is an oophorectomy. So basically depends upon many factors, mainly the age of the patient and the menstrual status.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, Ashok, sir. Next question is from our president, Dr. Vikram Desai, sir. I'll unmute
Hello,
his
sir.
mic. Yeah, Vikram, sir, please go ahead.
Hello, sir.
1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vikram, sir, you are online. He's not unmuting yet.
Okay.
I'll go to next person by that time.
Hello.
The-
Hello.
Yeah.
He's there.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening,
Sir.
Prachi.
Good evening. Congratulations, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you for a wonderful exposition on CA breast.
Oh,
You have really
thank you so
enlightened us.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, sir.
A couple of questions. In
Yes.
cases of DCIS, how do you
Yeah.
decide upon which type of particular BCT we are going to offer, like a lumpectomy or a quadrantectomy or a wide local excision? Because in such patients, what happens is if you take out too less, it could compromise your
Yeah.
oncological principles. If you leave behind a lot, that also is a question. So how do you
Absolutely.
decide? What are the criteria?
Mainly, yes, sir. So in such cases, MRI is going to be of immense benefit in order to
Definitely.
delineate the extent of DCIS. Clinically, it may feel like a little bit of a diffuse lesion somewhere, but it might overspill into other quadrants, as you've rightly said. And
That's right.
so if it is a multicentric, of course, BCT is out. If it is localized to one particular area, I mean, it should not be multicentric. So that has to be first. If it fits into the criteria for BCT, like in any in a tumor, we have to subject to BCT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like in one of your slides, in MRI, you
Yes.
could pick up the internal mammary node also getting
Yes.
involved. So
Right,
that
yeah.
could be definitely missed on clinical examination, and you might wrongly offer a BCT.
Absolutely, sir. Because in this case, I mean, the image which I showed, it was, I mean, of
Yeah.
course, I found it on the net, but it was labeled as that the primary lesion has been subtracted from that image. And
That's right. Okay.
that was done to pick up any other foci.
Yeah.
And incidentally, the
Another,
lymph node is there.
okay. Another query is there any role of adjuvant chemotherapy in these patients of BCT? Because radiotherapy is a given. You're going to offer it to
Yes,
all the
sir.
patients.
Yes, sir. It all
What
depends
about-
upon, as I said, the hormone receptor status. So
Yeah,
nowadays, most
definitely.
of the patients of BCT are getting chemotherapy because we are doing extensive ERPR and HER2 studies, and as well as these prognostic tools which are being utilized. So
Okay.
whatever offers the best benefit to the patient has to be given.
Right. And how do you follow up these patients? Like how
Sir,
frequently do you
Vikram,
call,
sir.
and what exactly do you do in the follow-up?
Vikram, sir,
So yeah, so the president's
last
narrative.
question for you. Sorry, sir.
That's the last question.
So follow-up with BCT is the same as that with mastectomy, mainly clinical follow-up. The patient follows up with the oncologist because most of them are on adjuvant treatment. but it is usually after the first 15 days, then after a month, then usually after every 3 months, and then 6 monthly.
Yeah,
So that's
nice. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank
Congratulations again.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, next question is by Dr. Vikas Jain, sir, from Gondia. Vikas, sir, please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Vikas, sir.
Hello,
Yeah, sir,
hello,
what-
doctor.
Yes, ma'am. Nice presentation, madam.
Thank you.
I have one simple question, madam.
Yeah.
One of my patient presented with occult primary with secondaries in spine.
Oh, okay, sir. Right.
So how do we manage such patient?
It is straight away stage 4. So, of course, I mean, one has to
Means,
start chemotherapy anyway, radiation also, and then do a mastectomy. So obviously,
madam, but the primary is not obviously palpable, madam.
okay. So has an MRI been done? Has it not been picked up on MRI?
Yes, madam.
Also?
MRI was done and it was suggestive of secondaries from breast and in the spine. So what should be the follow-up? Patient has received the radiotherapy and now what should be done in such patient follow-up?
Okay, I think one has to have the primary for sure, the exact location where it is.
Yes,
what is
madam.
the age of the patient?
She is young patient, madam, just 32-year female.
Oh my God. And absolutely no specimen from the breast.
No specimen, madam.
No specimen. So
And
at present,
after radiotherapy, she is better now. She is moving around with no neuro deficit. But what should be the prognosis and how to follow up such patient? Should we search for other?
I think so. It has to. I think they would have given us some epithelial malignancy. Have they given it as a duct carcinoma in the spine?
Yes, madam. Secondaries from CA breast.
Usually, it is given as something like probably from breast, or it is usually reported as an epithelial malignancy. I think one needs to review that report also before, and one has to find very, very unusual, very rare.
Very rare.
Okay, madam. I will discuss you in our WhatsApp group the reports and detail.
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, Vikas, sir. So next question is from Dr. Yogesh Sabu, sir. Sabu, sir, you are online. Sir, please unmute your mic. Sabu, sir. Okay, go next. Next is Dr. Nilesh Junankar, sir. Nilesh, sir.
First time मलाही नाही माहिती.
Rahate, sir. Question from your side.
Yeah. Congratulations, Prachi, for that beautiful lecture. I have some few queries.
Yes, sir.
Tell us something about that Angelina Jolie effect, and in short, how the patient's primary first degree relatives they should be advised for the follow-up, and what should be the follow-up of the opposite breast of a patient.
Right. So basically, very important question. And we are now getting into genetic counseling of families. I mean, I have treated 3 families. Fortunately, none of them had the gene. There are a lot of issues in our population because, first of all, is affordability and accessibility to screening of entire families. But it should be ideally done if more than one member, siblings, sisters, or mother-daughter are involved. That there are lots of genes which are studied, but what we know most commonly is BRCA1 and BRCA2. And that determines, and of course, as we've seen all these Oncotype DX and MammaPrint and Ki67 and all these studies which are done on the primary patient. So once these are studied and we know the prognostic indicators, one should plan if one needs a patient, the recurrence is known. I don't say that I'm an authority on this genetic counseling, so I'm not the proper person to answer this question. But basically, we need to do a genetic profiling of families, and in case the likelihood is strong, then what Angelina Jolie did has to be done. And fortunately, it is very rare. Would Abhinav like to say something?
Yes, ma'am. So in case if we find out that the risk of a female is more than 20%, there are various different types of models which can be kind of put forward, like BC Pro model and all for breast cancer related patients. And in case if the risk is more than 20%, then we can subject the patient for regular screening modality like that of MRI. And BRCA genetic testing like BRCA1 and 2 have to be done in such patients. Now, as we know that in case if BRCA1 is positive, there are around more than 80% chances for the female of developing breast malignancy, and 60 to 80% of she having a ovarian tumor. Now again, that issue is like extremely difficult in case if you find it out in a female who has not born a family. So these are some of the difficult issues which we need to kind of sit down with the patient, have a session of counseling, and in such cases, now one important thing which has been found out, that it is not only the ovarian tumor, but it is mainly the fallopian tubes which are being involved in cases of a BRCA gene positive patient. So such patients can be followed up with serial MRIs up to maybe the age of 35 till the time she completes her family. And once she kind of completes, then she can be given that option of a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy, or she can be still continued on follow-up. And if there is any evidence of malignancy, patient can undergo a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy. At the same time, she can also undergo salpingo oophorectomy. So these are some of the issues which we need to.
There is the option of freezing ova also nowadays. So what is coming up is going to be very good for the next generation.
Of the ovas can be definitely done, and it has to be kind of tailored according to the individual case, because we have to see also the background of the patient, at the same time the affordability questions of the patients. So such cases have to be counseled individually, and they have to be decided upon individually.
So next question is from Dr. Nilesh Junankar, sir. Prachi madam, Rahate sir has all more questions. He has sent you on your WhatsApp.
Okay,
so you will have
sir.
to Nilesh sir, sure. You are online. Nilesh sir. Nilesh Junankar sir. Nilesh Junankar sir, he is on mute. Okay, Dr. Yogesh Sabu sir, you can ask the question. Yogesh sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Sir, go ahead.
Yes, Prachi, congrats for a nice presentation.
I
just want to ask you one question. If the patient is postmenopausal with triple negative, should we give a tamoxifen or letrozole, and how much time we should give? Postmenopausal triple negative.
Triple negative patients don't do well with hormone therapy. They need chemotherapy for sure. So I mean, again, those are very difficult to treat patients. The prognostication is not very easy, but chemotherapy is needed.
But should we give a tamoxifen or letrozole or not?
It will not benefit, sir.
Okay, it will not benefit. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So Nilesh Junankar sir, you are online? Not yet. We go ahead. We have Dr. Sanjay Ghate sir from Chandrapur. Okay. Sanjay sir. Sanjay sir, unmute your mic and ask the question. Sanjay sir, not there. We have Deshpande sir, Yashwant Deshpande sir.
Can you hear me?
Sir.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello. Sanjay sir, he is online. Sanjay sir is online.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
When I raised my hand for the question, my question was regarding the sentinel lymph node.
Okay. So that has been dealt with.
Yeah, it has been very well explained by chairperson. Anything you want to add to that?
I think Abhinav has covered everything exhaustively.
Yeah. I also got my answer there. That's why.
Right.
Thank you and nice.
Thank you.
Yashwant Deshpande sir. Deshpande sir, please go ahead with your question. I have opened your mic, Deshpande sir.
अभिनवच्या बाजूला बसलेत का सर?
अभिनव सर आहेत का?
दुसऱ्या कॉम्प्युटरवर.
He had raised his hand.
हाँ हाँ.
Nilesh sir, are you online back? Nilesh Junankar sir. So this is the last question from Nilesh.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Prachi. Yeah, excellent talk as expected.
Thank you.
I have one question. As you know, we old surgeons are usually reluctant for breast conservative surgery.
I know, but you're not old.
Yeah, thinking is old maybe. So my question is, in breast conservative surgery, we don't remove nipple and areola, which is must in the radical surgeries. So what is your take on recurrence if you don't remove nipple and areola in a breast conservative surgery?
See, it depends upon, we have to decide as per the position of the lump, what kind of lumpectomy or a wide local excision or a quadrantectomy we are going to do. So if the growth, if the lesion is under the areola, retroareolar, then a central quadrantectomy can be done. So that
I
is
am talking about the away from the nipple areola, quite away from the nipple areola.
No, the results are very, very comparable. The 5-year survival, 10-year survival rates are just the same as a modified radical mastectomy. There is no difference. Of course, with good patient selection, of course. So that does not determine any change.
What does Abhinav has to say about that?
Sir, good evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, sir. So basically, the trials which have happened, and also in most of the literature which has come up, the reason for a breast conservation surgery being accepted all over the world is there were 2 big trials which were conducted, and what they found out was that there is definitely no difference in the overall survival of the patient. Yes, there has been a change in terms of a loco-regional recurrence. For example, a patient who has undergone a breast conservation surgery versus a patient who has undergone a MRM. So what they found out that there is definitely a higher percentage of loco-regional recurrence. That is a tumor which is happening in some of the quadrant of the breast after a breast conservation as compared to a modified radical mastectomy. But sir, what has happened is that they found out when in long-term survival of the patient, it has not contributed. And those loco-regional recurrences which have happened, like for example, it is like 8.8% versus 3.3% for a BCS versus MRM. So they have not translated into a difference in the overall survival, and whatever recurrences happen after a BCS, we always have an option of either a wide excision or a conventional MRM. So that's why it since this is not being translated into a difference in the overall survival, most of the places in the world are now slowly coming up with that concept of a breast conservation, sir.
With a good follow-up with complete adjuvant treatment, radiation and chemotherapy wherever required, and hormone therapy, I think the results are more or less comparable in our population.
Yes, ma'am. But as rightly pointed out by sir also.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So in our scenario also. Yes, ma'am.
The nipple and areolar excision or not does not actually,
yes,
hamper the results.
And in fact, if there is something which is hiding behind the nipple areola, like if we have got a retroareolar small lump of 1 by 1 centimeter, which is just retroareolar, rest of the breast is all clean. So in such cases, in fact, there is now a concept of skin sparing mastectomy, in which only the nipple areola complex is removed and rest of the entire breast parenchyma is being preserved. So skin sparing mastectomy gives a good bulge for the female and cosmetically very well accepted. And post-operatively, there are now concepts of tattooing of the breast as well as nipple implants, so which can kind of recreate the breast in a very good manner. So
thank you, Abhinav, for touching on that, because that was one thing I had it in mind, but it just skipped, putting it on the slide.
Yeah, Prachi, scientifically, I think it may be correct. But the mindset of Indian patients, they will catch your neck if they have a recurrence. Even for simple piles surgery, if they get a recurrence after 5 years, they will come to you that, oh, piles has come again. So this is difficult to handle, I mean, with the breast conservative surgery in the Indian mindset.
Yes, sir. Actually, that is the problem, because BCT has not caught up so well, because everybody is under the impression that pura nikal do aur baat khatam ho jaye. That is the general mindset. So, I mean, talking practically and scientifically.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have to give a choice.
Yeah. And ma'am, in fact, in Indian scenario, again, that concept of tailoring of these surgeries is extremely important. Like, for example, we are getting a patient of a 3 by 3 centimeter lump in upper outer quadrant of the breast, and which is like an ideal case for BCS. Now the patient is coming from a very peripheral part of Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan, and we know that the patient is not able to follow up for radiation therapy for 20 days. So definitely we would kind of err on the side of MRM in such cases.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Prachi.
Thank you.
Last question from Dr. Deshpande, sir. Please unmute your mic. Deshpande, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me, Prachi?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Hello, Prachi.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations for the wonderful elaborative talk on a very important and common topic. And I congratulate Yogesh, Vikram and Atish for this wonderful activity. Now I'm going to ask only one question as is the rule, but maybe question A, B and C. Angelina Jolie at the end of your presentation was a very pleasing thing. Second thing, I'll ask you about prophylactic mastectomy, as somebody has already asked, and second about the reconstructive breast surgery. Now you have a long series of breast cancer cases. What is your experience as far as the reconstruction of the breast is concerned following MRM? What I feel and what I observe is there are very few patients who really come for reconstructive surgery.
Very few.
Have you come across any case wherein you have done a prophylactic mastectomy?
No, sir, not yet. I have not done a prophylactic mastectomy, and reconstruction, everybody inquires about it, but actually people haven't come. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody going to a plastic surgeon also later on. Otherwise, of course, we would get a follow-up if a patient has gone and
normally we do it after 1 year after MRM, no? I mean after the complete comprehensive treatment.
Yes, sir. Of course, in the West, I mean, it is very common, but not in our population. At least in Nagpur population.
But not that people are not conscious about it. Females are conscious about it, but I don't know for what reason they are not going for a. Maybe the awareness is not there, or I mean some kind of a. We are unable to. Pardon?
There are the age factor and cultural taboos. Two things.
Maybe yes. I mean, over the period of time, maybe we are able to create the awareness in them, and we may come across wherein people would go for reconstructive surgery.
Absolutely.
Wonderful presentation, Prachi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, one question more from Dr. Unmesh Chandak.
Okay.
Chandak,
hello, ma'am. Hello, madam. Good evening.
Hello. Good evening. Good evening.
Madam, it was an excellent talk. It is really a difficult task to, talk on CA breast in an hour. Madam, just a comment about, as Junandkar sir was talking about BCT, I think the most important point is availability of a very good frozen section setup and a good pathologist to report it. And secondly, an excellent radiotherapy unit. I think these are the two things which are not available everywhere. That might be the reason, apart from, of course, the fear of recurrence. That's
Could
what
be possible. That is correct. Nowadays, we do have, mainly it is for sentinel lymph node. Wherever that is considered.
No, but the margins, I mean, the intra-op examination on frozen about the margins and base, I mean, that is very important. We don't get, I mean, the presentation usually is late in our, I mean, this thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you,
of course, I mean, right. Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
So we have finished everything by 9:20. That is something which we want from each and every speaker. Comprehensive talk within 50-55 minutes and then half an hour of discussion. So I expect all the speakers and all our attendees to look into this, and seriously we'll do same thing every day. So rest of the questions to be asked on WhatsApp group to ma'am.
Sure.
just now I got one hand up from Dr. Gayatri Deshpande, madam. I'll ask her, let her ask one more. Last.
Sure.
Gayatri ma'am, go ahead. Gayatri ma'am,
Hello.
Hi, Gayatri.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
Yes,
ma'am.
Gayatri.
A big fan of your presentation as usual.
Thank you.
I just have one question. We have a lot of awareness of breast cancer nowadays in our practice also, and we recommend self breast examination for every female who visits. At least I do that for every female who visits me. But
Very
as
important.
is the case in the West, do you have any comment about routine screening mammographies in our setup?
See, basically, it has to be done once every 3 years in a patient who has a positive family history, and in those who, once in 3 years in a patient who doesn't have a positive family history, and usually annual screening mammograms in a patient with a positive family history. And a breast self-examination is, of course, it needs to be emphasized. Of course, with a surgical audience, I did not talk about that because it is known to everybody.
Okay, so the mammography is after the age of, I mean, which age?
35 routinely.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Gayatri.
Ma'am, one more question from a PG resident. I just complain that I don't allow PG residents to ask a question, so I'll let them ask.
Please go ahead.
Sorry for that, residents. Sorry for that. Yeah, Priyanka Taide, go ahead with your question. Dr. Priyanka.
Yeah.
Go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself.
Good evening, Prachi ma'am.
Good evening, Priyanka.
Ma'am, I have a question. What is the prognosis and treatment of ER positive and PR negative cancers?
See, if it is a ER positive patient, she is going to respond to hormone therapy, and the prognosis, of course, it depends upon the other status also, HER2 and other receptors. But usually those which are estrogen dependent get a good benefit from tamoxifen or anti-estrogenic treatment.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Now
Thank
we
you,
are done.
Yogesh. Thank you, Atish. Thank you, Abhinav.
Abhinav, thank you. Atish, sir, thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you, Yogesh bhai. Thank you, Atish sir.
Yeah.